Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to be reading part 3 of Charlie Small Gorilla City. Okay, so in the last video, we ended here. So, let's start at the next page. Whatever it was that had been following me stayed hidden in the trees, and I knew that I was safe. Phew! I gasped in relief. That was close. But as I stared across the empty savannah, I felt cold inside. I'd half convinced myself that when the jungle ended, I'd find myself not too far from town, perhaps just on the other side of the ring road. But now, faced with grasslands almost as far as the eye could see, I was almost certain that I wouldn't be back home in time for tea. This is going to take some explaining, I muttered, reaching for my phone again. I was just about to dial the number when the ground started to rumble and shake. A terrific noise like an express train filled the air. I looked up and dropped my phone in fright. Charging at full speed towards me was a rampaging rhinoceros, all steamed up. I stood rooted to the spot as, head down, the rhino charged. His nostrils were spouting great clouds of steam that swirled around his body, so it seemed as if he was on fire. His skin puckered and covered in a great eruption of boils, and his legs pumped back and forth with a thumping and swishing that sounded like huge pistons. Closer and closer the huffing, snorting beast stampeded. His horn, shining like polished silver, was pointing straight at me. Stop! I managed to squeak, squeezing my eyes tight shut. And at that precise moment, with an explosion of steam, the rhinoceros ground to a halt just centimeters away. I opened my eyes, hardly daring to breathe, and waved away the fog of steam that coiled around me. The rhino stared back, nostrils bubbling like a boiling kettle, but didn't move. Slowly I raised my arm and touched him on the nose. He was made of tin. I tapped him harder, but still he didn't move. No matter how hard I rapped and banged, he stayed as still as a statue. Carefully, I circled the rhinoceros, all thoughts of phoning home forgotten. His body was a series of shaped and scalloped sheets of armor plating, fastened together with heavy bolts. What I had thought were burrows were really great domed rivets as large as ping-pong balls. His neck and legs were made of chainmail, which allowed them to move and bend, and his tail was formed from a series of interlocking joints ending in a large diamond-shaped club. I'd never seen or heard anything like him. Was he a beast or a machine? Whichever he was absolutely magnificent. Completing a circuit of this remarkable beast, I was amazed to find what looked like a hatchway in his side. I gave the rhino another pat, just to make sure he wasn't going to spring back into life, and his great body echoed like an empty oil drum. Then, using the screwdriver tool on my penknife, I unscrewed the bolts that held the hatch door in place. It opened with a rusty screech, and I peered inside. As a cloud of steam dispersed, I could see a mass of pipes and dials. The rhino was a machine, a very complicated and sophisticated one. The pipes twisted and turned like metallic intestines, joining, separating, and diverging from one another on their convoluted route inside the great barrel of the rhino's belly. At their center was a water tank, and on it was riveted an oval badge which said, Jake's Man Works, the steam-powered rhinoceros, patent number 102633. Brilliant, I thought. Steam-powered. Peering more closely to try to see how the rhino might work, I saw a slip of paper lodged in a spring clip on the inside of his belly plate. Here's what it looked like. I'll stick it in the next page of this journal so you can see how incredible it is too. I studied the diagram for a few minutes and then leaned inside the rhino again. A small pilot light underneath the water tank was popping and flickering, but when I unscrewed the cap on the tank itself, I could see it was completely dry. Fetching the water bottle from my rucksack, I carefully filled the tank up. The main dial had flipped to roaring hot, which I guess might have accounted for the rhino's fiery disposition, so I turned the pointer down to cool. I pressed reset on the main panel and sat back to see what would happen to this very, very rare steam-powered beast. Okay, you can have a look at the piece of paper that Charlie Small found if you like. Or you can just skip. And this is the other side. Riding the rhino. The pilot light fired the rhino's burners and the water started to heat up. Soon it was bubbling merrily, and as the steam went coursing through his pipes and valves, the rhino turned his head and looked at me. "Good boy, Rhino," I said a bit nervously, patting his snout as he nudged me gently with his great head. Then, with a squirt of steam, the rhino harumphed, dipped his head and started to tug and chew at the dry grasses, taking on fuel for his internal furnace. It was amazing, and the inventor had to be some kind of genius. So long as there was food and water around, this mechanical rhino could keep going forever. But what was it doing out here on the sun-drenched savannah? As I rubbed behind his ears, the rhino closed his eyes in ecstasy. "That's it. Stay cool, Rhino," I said calmly. Then I had a great idea. Maybe the rhino could help me cross the plain and find a pathway home. After all, there was no going back the way I had come. Reaching into my rucksack, I pulled out the ball of string. Cutting off a length, I looped it through the rhino's mouth to act as reins, and cautiously climbed onto his back. "Okay," I said, give him a gentle kick. "Let's go!" With a few metallic squeaks and squeals, the rhinoceros lumbered into motion and trotted across the plain. "Faster!" I cried, flicking the reins. "Faster!" The rhino broke into a canter, and we tore through the tall grasses and headed towards a distant green smudge that I thought might be more forest. I did not even ridden a horse before, but here I was, on the back of a huge metal rhino, screaming across a sun-drenched plain that glowed in a late afternoon sun. The grasses swayed in the slight breeze, creating wave after wave that rippled across the savannah, making it look like a golden ocean. My rhino putted across the sea like a little steamboat, leaving a trail of flattened grass in our wake. I stood up in the saddle, imagining how easy it would be to herd cattle with such a powerful steed. "Yee-haw!" I whooped. But after hours of lumbering forwards, I started to feel a bit disheartened. The plain truly was vast, and the forest just wasn't getting any closer. I was starting to wish that I'd had a bit more riding experience too. Bouncing up and down in the metal saddle was becoming a real pain in the bum. Every jolting stride the rhino took rattled my bones and bruised my behind. I'd been worried about missing tea, but now I didn't think I'd even make it home before dark. It looked like I was going to have to camp out for the night in an unknown land under a strange sky, just like a real explorer. The thought made me feel a whole lot better until I remembered Mom and imagined the look on her face when I told her I was planning to camp out without a tent. Sighing, I reached for my mobile again. Very late for tea. I couldn't get a signal on my phone, but a few miles away I could see a lone palm tree climbing tall and straight from the middle of the plain. Maybe if I shinned up its trunk, I could get a better signal, I thought. I turned the rhino towards it. But my plan was foiled. As we got closer, I could see that the trunk of the huge palm was as smooth as glass and impossible to climb. I slid down from the rhino's back and sank into the tall grasses that waved above my head. I suddenly felt very lonely, stuck in the middle of the endless plain, in a strange land, and with the sun starting to go down. There was nothing I could do but make camp for the night. I'd have to phone Mom tomorrow as soon as I could get a signal. But as I waddled through the grasses, trying to flatten them into a bed, I tripped. Looking down, I saw a thin silver thread stretched between the stalks. Surely I couldn't have tripped over that, I thought. Grabbing the strand, I tried to snip it in half, but I couldn't. It was incredibly strong. Curious, I followed the thread through the grasses until it joined another thread, then another and another, until my finger had traced its way to the center of a huge, complicated spider's web. A shiny electric blue spider, about the size of a walnut, came out to see what it had caught and sat staring at me from halfway up a grass stalk. Not more spiders' webs, I thought. Feeling slightly shaken, I stood back and inspected the gem-bright creature. It didn't seem worried that I had trampled through its home and immediately started to make repairs. Okay, thanks for watching this video. That's part 3. Make sure to like and subscribe for part 4 of this amazing series. Bye!